Hello there, remastered people. I wasn't planning on doing any more Oblivion Remastered videos, but here we are. I would say it's in large part due to the modders being absolute chads and creating things in only a few short weeks that took Skyrim and old Oblivion years to achieve. So this video is mainly focused on how Oblivion Remastered improved combat over the original Oblivion, but also, it's a combat mods video to see what the modders have added on top of that. I want to take a moment to contrast original Oblivion's combat with Oblivion Remastered to get a sense of the additions the good people at Virtua Studio did to give the remaster a modern feel. So the feel of combat. The biggest change is when you hit a target with a weapon, they flinch in the direction you hit them from. This is huge in making combat feel weighty and reactive. Gone are the days where you flail and your only indication was when the enemy's health bar went down. In the same vein, you can't just flail your weapon anymore. When you swing, your character does an attack combo of, I think, usually about 3 different swings. With daggers, it's 4, with a couple stabs. This means combat has timing, an ebb and flow. Your enemy attacks, you parry, defend, or dodge, and you counter while they're off balance. At least this is how Sword and Board plays. A still huge negative about Oblivion's combat is that you can't dual wield. It's pretty wild this was only introduced in Skyrim in the DES series. I mean, technically it's in Daggerfall, or at least Daggerfall Unity, but you just have the weapon in your offhand and it just kind of sits there. Original Oblivion had mods that made swords and daggers with the shield tag, and you could really just use them as a shield, just putting them up to block with a weapon. Which might be more realistic, but I don't want realism in my video games. And also, since you don't need a free hand to cast magic, it kind of defeats the purpose of having a free hand. Carry a torch, I guess. Here are some of the mods that have come out that add to the combat feel. Time block means if you block at the right time, you avoid all damage. It makes combat feel even more reactive. Simplified Hitstop slows down action when you hit enemies, giving your attacks even more impact. One more, maybe a crowning jewel of this video. Stop looking at my back gives you normal 360-degree rotation of your character. You can either pick between 2 versions. One that does it while you don't have your weapon drawn, or the version that does it all the time. There's also a way to use it with lock-on in the description of the mod, but it'll take a little tinkering. And that does standard movement when you're locked on and 360 movement when you're not locked on. So that's it. We've got true directional movement from Skyrim in Oblivion Remastered already. This was a mod that took about 10 years in original Oblivion and Skyrim and took about 3 weeks in Oblivion Remastered. Finally, responsive combat AI makes your enemies really aggressive instead of in vanilla whenever they give you a moment to breathe between combos. Basically, every combat encounter your opponent is going to doggedly pursue you until they are dead or you are dead. Let's talk about the individual melee weapon skills. In original Oblivion, you got access to different directional power attacks as you leveled up your weapon skill. Now they're just available at all times. Instead, power attacks deal more damage and do buffs and debuffs, which original Oblivion also did, but their buffs and debuffs were different. Blade will apply weakness to normal weapons and bleed. Blunt applies shield to you and silence to your enemies. Hand to hand now disarms and deals fatigue damage. This may actually be a downgrade because the debuffs in some places are less good. Like all weapons used to disarm, knock down, and paralyze. On the bright side, the range of most melee weapons is better. So the real stinker out of these is the blunt weapon. I don't really know why it causes you to have a shield, but rest assured there is a mod that fixes this. It's called Bloodlust, which gives you a stacking movement speed buff and higher crit damage when you slay an enemy, making you feel like a real berserker with an axe or a mace. Alright, ranged combat. Projectile speed is generally faster, which makes it easier for you to hit, but is also harder to block and dodge projectiles. I'm fine with this change. Also, bow damage is higher, but bow sneak attack damage is lower, which means Stealth Archer isn't as much of a powerhouse as it originally was. Still a great build, obviously, because there is no danger when they don't know where you are, you're shooting from a mile away. Also, now you can sheath a bow to cancel a drawn arrow, which is huge. I can't remember the number of times I had to just aim at the floor and catch my arrow, which is just dumb. I will say playing with super aggressive enemies makes combat archery really difficult, but here's a mod to help you with that. Spell and Arrow Stagger Chance. so you have a chance to kite your enemies with bows. Here are some changes to fatigue, which ties in with hand-to-hand. You no longer become randomly staggered when blocking. It only happens when you block with no fatigue left. Also in Oblivion, as your fatigue lowered, you would deal less damage with weapons, until you weren't dealing any damage at all at 0. This is no longer the case. You just can't use power attacks with 0 fatigue. This sounds good, and it is in most cases. The funny thing is, this is a significant downgrade to hand-to-hand. In both versions, hand-to-hand damage scales with hand-to-hand skill and strength up to 100. In OG Oblivion, it would negatively scale with less fatigue. It would also positively scale with more fatigue. This means you could cast a Fortify Fatigue plus 500 on yourself and punch people into the sun. That being said, still playable, just expected to be painful in Expert and Master difficulty. Movement. Hey, you can sprint now. One mod that was a day 1 download for me was No Sprint, No Combat Fatigue, which removes fatigue costs for sprinting outside of combat. Makes overland travel without a horse just a little bit faster. Consequently, horses are also faster vanilla. Of course, I decided to make my horse even faster with console commands. There is nothing wrong with this in my opinion, because you're experiencing overland travel in Oblivion just a little bit faster. And because I don't have anywhere else to put this, have you ever noticed when you approach an enemy, goblins, bandits, what have you, they aggro you while you're on your horse, you dismount, run towards them, and then they run past you to target your horse? It's friggin' crazy, right? I always imagine with the goblins that they just targeted the horse for the sweet horse meat.
Get your piping hot horse burgers, horse fries, horse cakes and shakes. We got tongue straight from the horse's mouth.
It all sounds good.
I think it has to do with the enemy AI identifying mounted you as the horse, and they keep targeting the horse when you get off. Also, if you have a higher personality than your horse, they target the horse instead, because your horse is a jerk, apparently.
Horses are terrible people.
For that, there's Stop Attacking My Horse. Simple, they'll just target you instead of your horse. And did you know there was a dodge roll in Oblivion? I certainly didn't until I started playing Oblivion Remastered and I looked it up, because it was 50 acrobatics, and this was pre-Dark Souls. I didn't really get into more action-y action RPGs until later. You could say the Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim pipeline was what got me there actually. But anyway, in Oblivion Remastered, it's been replaced with a step dodge, which is 1, more reasonable, and 2, available at 25 acrobatics, meaning you can get it right out of the gate. Step dodges as a whole look more plausible, although it is still clunky as hell because you have to hold a direction, press, block, and jump, a 3-button dodge. I know I mentioned this in a previous video, but 1-button dodge is a nice mod to make this into a modern 1-button dodge. Also, it doesn't have iframes, which can be fixed with mods. A mod named Dodge iframes. Alright, general difficulty. The difficulty slider is now 5 levels: Novice, Apprentice, Adept, Expert, and Master, similar to Skyrim. In the original, it was a slider, so you could just inch out tiny bits of challenge if it was just slightly too hard or slightly too easy. Many things were improved with the remaster, but to me this is a significant downgrade, especially because the jump between Adept and Expert is 1 times to 3.5 times damage received and 1 to 1/6 damage dealt by the player, and Master is 5 times. I don't know how you feel about hitting an enemy 1,000,000 times and it not going down, but I find that really boring. So there are several mods to fix this. Difficulty slider fixed gives a less significant jump between the difficulty levels. It's what I used for most of my early playthrough. Classic difficulty slider pretty much changes it back to the original in Oblivion, lets you have an actual slider. And if you really want to have it your way, better difficulty lets you set the amount of damage taken and dealt with each difficulty level. If you wanted, you could crank up the damage taken and dealt for super deadly combat for all parties. Now let's talk about stats. Health, fatigue, and magicka now all regenerate over time, which is pretty neat. Way more convenient for the modern player. In the original, health didn't regenerate at all. Now it's out of combat and based on endurance. Magicka regeneration in the original was based on total magicka, which led to basically, if you just make your intelligence sky high, you'd regenerate 1,000 magicka every few seconds. Now it's based on willpower. Daggers and short blades scale off of agility rather than strength, which makes them even more viable to pair with a bow. And honestly, it makes a lot more sense. And today I'm not going to get into how I feel about stats in general in these games, but I think I have a video essay in me about it. Because bows should be able to scale off strength. I mean, mainly that's what people historically used. It's hard to aim if you can't draw the bow back. Suffice to say, I like what Skyrim did and kind of eliminated stats in general and eliminated the middleman. But I'll talk about that later. Fortifying skills and stats above 100 doesn't continue to scale up damage, which is good because this could get really ridiculous. Strangely, Shield Bash from the block skill does scale damage above 100. I don't know why they made that choice, but it can make for some huge damage Shield Bashers. Now all I need is to be able to dual wield shields. Alright, let's talk about enemies. Not technically combat, but if you didn't have enemies, you wouldn't have anybody to do combat with. It might be just me, but after playing heavily modded Skyrim, Oblivion Remastered feels kinda empty, so I added more enemies. Oblivion Remastered Wilderness Overhaul adds a lot of enemies, some of them a little overtuned. That is in fact why I kept all the NL tags on this stuff, so I know when to be like, oh no, this is a modded enemy. There is an NL tag remover, if you want it. So far I've seen more wolves, bears, goblins, spriggans, ghosts, zombos, slaughterfish, and mud crabs. I see there's a lot more, including an ebony warrior at level 18, which by the way the numbers on leveling is way different from Skyrim. If you multiply your Oblivion level by 2, it's about what Skyrim would be. So really that makes me want to talk about level scaling. In original Oblivion, when you level up, everything levels with you, causing you to become weaker if you leveled badly. Remastered curbed this a little bit by letting you choose what stats you level. So it's not nearly as much of a problem. I mean, if you still don't know what you're doing, then you could end up being weaker as you level up. And still, it is somewhat of a problem. But there are mods I want to talk about. Balanced NPC Level Cap makes it more like Skyrim. Everything has a tighter range it can level within. For example, if you go to a specific place, at a low level you'll just see rats and scamps and low-level bandits. But in original Oblivion and vanilla Oblivion Remastered, you'll just see stronger enemies. You'll see higher level bandits, Daedroths, etc. And that stuff will level up with you until infinity. Balanced NPC level cap will be like, this type of bandit should stop leveling at level 20. So as you get stronger, there's a good chance you'll see some stuff that's weaker than you, and some stuff that has leveled with you. Therefore, making you feel like you're stronger, but there are still threats out there. In a similar vein, leveled creature diversity keeps the lower level monsters on the level list as you level up. So not only will you have those bandits be capped, you'll also see some of the lower level bandits, and you'll see some rats, and you'll see some scamps with the Daedroths that at this point you can probably one-shot, but it's not like, hey, when you hit level 20, all rats and scamps are extinct. Nobody's got to worry about them being in their basement because you genocided them earlier on. Yeah, I mean, as it is, it doesn't make any sense. So these mods together help the feeling that you were growing in power, the immersion that yes, those creatures still do exist. And it allows you to get materials from those guys if you really want them. They don't just cease to exist. And that's really most of what I want to say about combat, movement, and gameplay. But one more thing, not combat related. Natural Bodies of Oblivion came out pretty much right away, like day 2, which makes the females look a lot better, but we didn't have clothes for them, making the body mod effectively useless. But now, NBO Clothes, NBO Armor, and NBO Males are out, so yay for that. And that's pretty much all for today. I want to take a second and say, watch my Skyrim videos. I've got this giant playlist called the Skyrim Cinematic Story. There should be something coming up on screen about it. So anyway, so long, and thanks for watching.